Imagine a world where the lines between national policy and the cutting edge of technology don't just blur, but they actively intertwine. A world where decisions made, way up in political capitals directly shape the innovation coming out of places like Silicon Valley, and maybe even more profoundly impact the daily lives, the careers, the whole future of thousands of skilled professionals who are, well, in many ways, the very engine of that innovation. How do these powerful, often really conflicting forces truly intersect in the real world? Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really complex and, for many people, a deeply personal issue: the evolving landscape of U.S. immigration policies, particularly how they impact the tech industry and the thousands of foreign-born professionals who really pile it. We want to sort of teach you the main content here, keep it fact-based, and really move from just a quick overview towards a much more advanced understanding of what's going on.
Exactly. Our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack the arguments, the counter-arguments, dig into the specific details from the stack of sources we have, and ultimately help you understand the real-world implications of these pretty significant shifts. We'll be exploring the resurgence of the America First rhetoric, the intense scrutiny being placed on the H-1B visa program, and also, crucially, the increasing vulnerability felt by legal immigrants, people who are already contributing hugely to the U.S. economy and society.
Yeah, and we've gathered some truly fascinating insights. We've got stuff from various news outlets, government reports, and even direct personal accounts. It gives us this multifaceted view of what's actually happening on the ground. We're going to teach you exactly what our sources convey, without injecting our own bias or assumptions. Okay, let's unpack this. All right, so our journey really begins with a foundational premise, something that has profoundly reshaped a lot of U.S. policy in recent years: the America First doctrine. Former President Donald Trump has consistently applied this philosophy directly to U.S. technology companies, and he's been, well, pretty vocal about it. He's explicitly called for these companies to be all in for America and to put America first. Now, this isn't just abstract political talk, right? Our sources highlight that it comes with some very specific criticisms. Yeah, Trump has repeatedly pointed out that many of our largest tech companies have, in his view anyway, reaped the blessings of American freedom, operating within a robust legal framework, benefiting from American markets, American innovation, while simultaneously engaging in what he considers, well, detrimental global practices. He criticizes them for building factories in China, for instance, or hiring vast numbers of workers over in India, and even structuring their finances in places like Ireland to slash profits, allegedly to avoid U.S. taxation. It's a very clear, almost sharp message about where he believes corporate loyalty should lie and what he considers an acceptable balance between, global operations and national interests.
And it's not just about economic patriotism in a general sense. Our sources reveal that Trump has introduced this powerful new phrase to categorize these global business practices: radical globalism. He uses this term to draw a really stark contrast with what he desires to see: a new spirit of patriotism and national loyalty within Silicon Valley and across the broader American corporate landscape. This rhetoric is incredibly important, not just as a political slogan, but because it directly sets the stage for the types of policies we're seeing now. It effectively frames global business models, especially those reliant on foreign labor or overseas operations, as somehow detrimental to the national interest. And that framing, as we'll definitely explore, has very real-world consequences for the individuals and the companies caught up in it.
Okay, so when we hear this America First call, particularly aimed at the tech sector, it's not just a general directive then. Our sources suggest it translates into a very direct, almost unequivocal message for the tech giants themselves. What does that warning shot actually sound like?
Well, it's an absolute unmissable warning shot, fired directly at some of the biggest names in tech, according to our sources. We're talking companies like Apple, Tesla, Google, Microsoft. The message they're reportedly receiving is simple and stark: stop hiring overseas. No quote. And the sources make it explicitly clear that India is specifically mentioned as a primary target of this directive. Now, this has profound implications for these companies. Many of them have come to rely really heavily on outsourcing for what they see as critical cost effectiveness and operational efficiency. We're talking about essential functions here, from core software development and cloud support to data services, all of which are often handled by large, highly skilled teams located abroad, particularly in places like India. And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're discussing here, the American Chamber of Commerce in India recently reported that U.S. companies alone created employment for over 5 million people in India by 2024. 5 million. Furthermore, our sources indicate there are approximately 1,800 offshore offices in India, most of them American-owned, and collectively they employ close to 2 million people. So, when a political figure says stop hiring overseas, This isn't just a minor adjustment, right? Not a tweak to a business model. It's an instruction that implies a massive upheaval for an established operational strategy, one involving millions of jobs, significant infrastructure, and deeply integrated global supply chains. This nationalistic approach, as our sources highlight, is also frequently framed within a larger context of global technological competition. Particularly this idea of winning the AI race and preventing foreign nations from dominating these critical emerging technologies. The underlying argument seems to be that if U.S. companies rely too much on foreign talent or foreign operations, it somehow undermines America's ability to innovate and lead in areas like artificial intelligence, potentially compromising national security or economic dominance down the line.
Right, that foundational America First stance with its broad call for national loyalty and that direct warning against overseas hiring, it really sets the stage perfectly for what we're about to dive into next, the H-1B visa program. This program, which is specifically designed to let U.S. employers temporarily hire foreign workers in specialty occupations, jobs requiring theoretical or technical expertise. It has become an absolute political flashpoint. It draws intense debate, intense scrutiny from all sides.
Indeed, it has. And to truly understand this debate, we really need to look at the accusations that are frequently leveled against the program, often led by prominent figures such as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Our sources detail Vance's core argument quite clearly. He contends that Silicon Valley tech firms, especially the big ones, claim they're desperate for workers. This supposed desperation, he argues, forces them to use overseas visa programs like the H-1B to fill these supposedly vacant roles. However, Vance then contrasts this claim with what he describes as a perplexing observation, that simultaneously the college-educated employment rate for STEM graduates right here in the U.S. seems to be declining. He finds this disconnect, this alleged contradiction, well, illogical. Vance specifically questions how, if American workers graduating from colleges aren't being hired for these jobs, how can companies genuinely claim to have a massive shortage requiring foreign workers? He even goes further, pointing to specific instances where, as he puts it, big tech companies announced layoffs of thousands of employees. For example, he cited a case where 9,000 workers were laid off globally. And then, seemingly in short order, these same companies apply for a bunch of overseas visas. He openly states, and I'm quoting directly from our sources here, "I sort of wonder that doesn't totally make sense to me." He directly named Microsoft in this critique, asserting, "I don't want companies to fire 9,000 American workers and then to go and say we can't find workers here in America. That's a bullshit story." His comments, our sources tell us, came after Microsoft did indeed lay off around 9,000 employees globally and subsequently came under scrutiny for its continued use of the H-1B program. So the perceived ethical and economic logic being questioned here is quite profound. If American workers are being laid off, why is there simultaneously this massive shortage that requires foreign workers to be brought in? This forms the basis of a significant and politically powerful narrative.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty strong and provocative accusation, a direct challenge to the very premise of the H-1B program. But here's where it gets really interesting, because an Indian-American tech investor quickly stepped forward with a direct rebuttal, stating unequivocally, according to our sources, that Vance is misleading people. This investor offers a fundamentally different perspective, not just on what actually happened at Microsoft, but on how the H-1B program is often being used in practice, highlighting a nuance that, frankly, often gets lost in the broader political rhetoric. Yeah, the investor made several key points that really shine a light on the complexities often missed in these heated political discussions. First, and critically, they pointed out that many of those laid off by Microsoft were actually H-1B employees themselves. And here's the kicker, the really devastating part for these individuals. These H-1B workers received no severance, no safety net, and were given only this harsh 60-day countdown to leave the country once their employment ended. That paints a very different and quite human picture of who is being affected by these mass layoffs, doesn't it? Second, the investor emphatically emphasized that Microsoft didn't bring in new foreign workers after laying people off. Instead, what our sources indicate they did was renew visas for longtime employees. These are individuals who have been living and working legally in the U.S. for many, many years, often stuck in those incredibly long green card backlogs, which, we'll definitely delve into later. And to make this point even clearer, the investor used this very helpful, very illustrative analogy. They said that seeing that that's replacing Americans is like saying letting a loyal employee stay and renew his visa in the building is the same as hiring someone new off the street. It's not. It's just letting them stay in the job that they already earned. This distinction is absolutely critical, I think. It differentiates between an employer bringing in entirely new foreign talent while American workers are being let go, versus merely allowing existing, long-term, legally employed foreign workers to maintain their status and continue their jobs, often because the green card process is just agonizingly slow. This really underscores how political narratives can sometimes simplify complex realities, missing this crucial difference between new hires and visa renewals for existing employees. People who are often deeply integrated into the American workforce and economy already.
Which brings us directly to the actual mechanics of the H-1B system as it stands now. And crucially, the proposed changes that could dramatically alter its landscape, particularly for skilled foreign workers. The H-1B visa, as our sources confirm, is overwhelmingly the most popular choice for Indian tech workers seeking to come to the U.S. It's not even close. Data from recent financial years, like 2023 and 2024, consistently shows that between 70% and 74% of these highly sought-after visas have gone to Indian nationals. It's also widely known as one of the hardest to get visas, mainly because of the intense competition and the sheer volume of applications. So the current system operates on a lottery basis, a straight-up lottery. The U.S. issues only 85,000 H-1B visas annually. Now, that includes 65,000 for regular applicants and an additional 20,000 specifically for those with a U.S. master's degree or higher. However, the demand far, far exceeds this limited supply. It's staggering. For example, in 2024, there were over 780,000 applications received for those 85,000 slots. That's more than 9 times the available slots. 9 times. This means that even highly qualified individuals with strong job offers from top-tier companies often miss out purely due to random chance. It's a statistical lottery. Now, our sources indicate that Trump's team is reportedly considering scrapping this lottery system entirely. Their proposal is to move to a points-based system. This weighted model, as it's being called, would award extra points to applicants based on specific criteria. For instance, points could be given for a high salary offer, for holding an advanced degree from a U.S. institution, or perhaps for being hired by a large, well-known firm. The implications of such a system are pretty significant and are definitely a subject of much debate among our sources. On one hand, you could argue it might appear to prioritize what some define as elite talent based on salary potential and academic credentials. However, our sources suggest a significant downside. It could also make it much harder for smaller companies or fresh graduates to secure these visas. Why? Because smaller companies might not be able to offer the highest salaries, right? And fresh graduates, even with strong degrees, may not have the work experience or those immediate high-paying offers that would rack up points in such a system. This shift would disproportionately impact Indian tech professionals, given their dominant share of current H-1B visas. It could potentially create a system where only a select few, from well-established companies and with specific high-level academic backgrounds, have a viable path to working in the U.S. It fundamentally changes the pathway from a random chance, which at least offers a glimmer of hope to many, to a structured system that, while seemingly merit-based, could significantly limit access for a broader range of talent and really reshape the demographic of H-1B holders.
Okay, so we've talked about how foreign workers gain access to the U.S. through visas like the H-1B and the fierce debate surrounding that process. But what does this all mean for those thousands, even millions of individuals who are already here, legally working, studying, living in the U.S.? Our next section shifts focus pretty dramatically from visa acquisition to visa maintenance and the increasing precarity now faced by legal immigrants. So yeah, what does this all mean for those already here, contributing to the American fabric?
That's an absolutely critical question. Because our sources indicate a significant and, frankly, quite concerning shift in enforcement strategy under a potential future Trump administration compared to his first term. Remember, back in 2017, the motto that really echoed across the political landscape was "Build the Wall." And the focus was largely, almost exclusively, on undocumented immigration. If you were in the U.S. legally, diligently following the rules, paying your taxes, you were generally considered safe, largely outside the immediate scope of intensified immigration enforcement. But our sources are telling us that something changed since then, something significant. They cite that within just 4 days of taking office this time, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agents arrested 538 people. This aggressive start was described as the biggest opening week in decades for ICE, signaling a new, unprecedented intensity and a clear directive for expanded enforcement. And here's the crucial shift that maybe the media largely missed while focusing on the plight of undocumented immigrants. The rules for legal immigrants were quietly changed as well. Our sources highlight a significant development on January 20th when an executive order was signed that fundamentally altered the landscape for anyone on a visa. It basically states that immigration authorities can now target any immigrant they want, even if you've only had minor violations that you already resolved, end quote. This is explicitly termed enhanced enforcement of legal status violations. What this actually means on the ground is, well, chilling. Any interaction with police, literally any interaction, no matter how minor, a traffic stop, a noise complaint, anything that brings you into contact with law enforcement, can now trigger a comprehensive review of your visa status. And when they review it, they don't just look at what happened today or yesterday, they go through your entire history in the country, scrutinizing every single detail. We have a very stark illustrative example of this from our sources, the case of Priya, a PhD student here in America. She faced a traffic violation way back in 2021, paid the fine immediately, considered the case fully closed, behind her. Yet 4 years later, that old ticket was found in her record, and her visa was shockingly canceled, just like that. This demonstrates the retrospective nature of this enhanced enforcement. And to understand how common this new approach might be, one small but telling study, based on 112 responses from affected individuals, showed that most people who had their visas revoked had indeed incurred a traffic violation maybe 2 or 3 years prior. This suggests a systemic shift where even minor, long-resolved infractions can now lead to severe and life-altering consequences for legal immigrants, turning past seemingly innocuous events into present-day threats to their legal status.
It's truly astonishing, almost unsettling, how even minor past infractions are being weaponized in this way. It must create this pervasive sense of fear. But here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, even more alarming, as our sources reveal. The State Department, it seems, has launched a program that utilizes, well, cutting-edge, maybe even chillingly advanced, new tools for enforcement. It's a significant leap beyond traditional methods, background checks or just reviewing past violations. Yeah, our sources reveal that this program leverages artificial intelligence to scrape the social media accounts of foreign nationals, including students. Internally, they've given this program a very telling, very direct name: Catch and Revoke. And it's not just about flagging things like old speeding or parking tickets that might pop up in a traditional background check. No, this AI program actively monitors student visa holders to identify individuals who express support for Hamas or other U.S. designated terrorist organizations through social media activity or participation in protests. The language in our sources here is quite explicit. It extends beyond just direct endorsement to broader digital engagement. Students who have shared or liked posts about Palestine are also targets of these systems. The implication, our sources highlight, is clear and direct. They are literally watching and tracking every single thing now. This takes surveillance to a whole new level, doesn't it? Moving beyond traditional legal violations into the realm of expression, even passive digital engagement, liking a post. It creates an environment of extreme caution and fear for anyone on a visa in the United States. It fundamentally redefines what constitutes a violation of visa terms.
And if you're wondering who is behind all of this, who the chief architect of these aggressive immigration policies is, well, our sources point directly to Stephen Miller. He is consistently identified as the key designer of Trump's immigration policies for both his past term and any potential future term. Our sources detail that Miller has been very open about his overarching goal: to reduce all immigration, not just illegal immigration. His underlying philosophy reportedly is that America is for Americans and Americans only, a deeply nationalistic stance. And this is then translated into very tangible, very aggressive directives for enforcement agencies like ICE. For instance, our sources report on a recent meeting in Washington where Miller reportedly told agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, that they need to hit 3,000 immigrant arrests every single day. 3,000 every day. To put that into perspective, our sources highlight that this is literally triple of what they were doing in Trump's first term. I mean, just pause here and think about what this means on the ground. ICE agents now literally have quotas to meet, like sales targets, but for human beings. And when you put that kind of intense pressure on agents, their operational priorities, even their discretion, fundamentally change. Our sources explain that under the Biden administration, for example, ICE was instructed to focus on very specific targets, primarily individuals with serious criminal records or those deemed threats to public safety. However, under this new directive, as reported by various sources, agents are effectively being told to bring in whoever you find. This leads to what are colloquially called collateral arrests. Essentially, if agents come looking for one specific person, even if you're there legally, you might get swept up too as part of their daily quotas. This highlights a significant and, it seems, deliberate blurring of the lines between legal and illegal immigration in the enforcement process. It creates a pervasive sense of vulnerability for anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, regardless of their status.
Wow. This significant shift in enforcement, with its expanded surveillance capabilities and these aggressive quotas for arrests, it inevitably connects to a specific community that seems to be feeling the brunt of this impact disproportionately: Indian professionals and students. The data our sources provide makes this connection exceptionally clear, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. The statistics make it unequivocally clear why Indian students and workers are particularly vulnerable to these heightened enforcement measures. It's almost mathematical. Indians constitute a third of the foreign students in U.S. schools. A third. To give you a concrete number, in 2024 alone, a staggering 330,000 Indian students came to America for higher education. That's a massive influx of talent, ambition, intellectual capital. And beyond students, Indians also dominate the H-1B visa program. They make up about 72% of H-1B visa holders, maybe even as high as 74% of new approvals in 2024. This makes them literally the biggest group of legal skilled workers there by a huge margin. So the statistical consequence of this demographic reality is straightforward yet profoundly impactful. When they go looking for violations, statistically they find more of us. Our sources confirm this with concrete data. According to the American Immigration Lawyers Association, 50% of international students in the U.S. who have recently had their visas revoked or service records terminated were from India. So this isn't just a general impact hitting everyone equally. It's a targeted, data-driven consequence for a specific, large, and frankly vital demographic within the U.S.
Those numbers are incredibly stark, and they really underscore the specific vulnerabilities and the constant uncertainty that this community faces despite their legal status. Let's dig into some of these specific vulnerabilities for both students and workers, because they are quite different. First, for F-1 visa holders, that's student visas, our sources frequently reference Marco Rubio's emphasis that a visa is not a right, it is a privilege. Now, this isn't just a political statement. It's deeply rooted in U.S. law. Under the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, the Secretary of State has broad authority to revoke visas of foreign nationals deemed a threat to public order or national interest. This, our sources explain, is precisely the legal underpinning for that catch and revoke program we talked about earlier. It provides the legal basis for the kind of actions where even minor infractions or certain social media activity can be used to justify a visa termination, effectively transforming a privilege into this precarious daily negotiation of existence for these students. Now, for H-1B workers, who are often, the backbone of American tech and critical to its innovation, the vulnerabilities are even more layered, more complex. After graduating from a U.S. institution, students typically get optional practical training, OPT. It's a temporary work authorization related to their field of study, lets them work for 1 to 3 years, 3 years if they're in STEM fields. After that, if they're lucky enough to win the H-1B lottery, a company sponsors their visa. But even if you win this incredibly competitive lottery, our sources indicate you are far from safe. Not at all. Under what are being described as Trump's new rules, any criminal record, even if it's misdemeanors, can get your visa revoked. That's a significant expansion. Furthermore, employers can just decide not to renew your visa, or, as we've seen with mass layoffs, your job can simply disappear suddenly. In that scenario, H-1B workers currently have a 60-day window to find a new job and secure a new sponsorship to stay in the U.S. Otherwise, they automatically become illegal and face deportation. And our sources indicate that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has even signaled its intent to shorten this already tight period to just 30 days from 60 days in a forthcoming rule, making an already precarious situation even more desperate. And as we discussed with the Catch and Revoke program, even posting the wrong thing on social media can end this American dream. A stark reminder of the expanded scope of surveillance and potential consequences. Our sources shared a truly poignant personal anecdote that really brings home the chilling reality of this situation. We heard about a senior controls design engineer in Silicon Valley, a man who's been in the U.S. for 9 years, painstakingly built a life, owns a house with a mortgage, and whose wife just gave birth to their first child, a brand new baby. Despite all this, he is still on H-1B, still temporary, still one layoff away from deportation. He confided in our source, and I'm quoting him word for word because it just encapsulates the raw fear so well. I check my mail every morning with my heart racing because any day could be the day ICE comes for me, and I've just had a daughter, so this uncertainty is terrifying. This individual has been here almost a decade, invested his life, his resources. This is truly his home. Yet his status remains incredibly fragile, contingent on policy shifts, job security, even a random traffic stop now, it seems.
And adding to this extreme precarity for India professionals is the green card backlog, a situation that is almost unbelievable in its scale and often gets overlooked in public discourse. Indians currently face an astronomical 195-year wait for a green card, according to the Congressional Research Service. Our sources explicitly state this is not an exaggeration, 195 years. If an Indian skilled worker were to apply for an employment-based green card today, their great-great-great-grandchildren might be the ones that finally receive it. It's absurd. The reason for this astronomical wait is a combination of factors. The U.S. issues only 140,000 employment-based green cards per year, which is already low. But crucially, there's also a 7% per country cap. This means that India, with a population exceeding 1.4 billion people, gets the exact same quota as Luxembourg with 600,000 people. It makes no sense proportionally. Consequently, currently 1.2 million Indians are waiting in line for green cards, a staggering number for a cap system that essentially locks them into this perpetual state of temporary residency for decades, often without any clear path to permanent status. So this creates an enduring state of temporary residency for highly skilled individuals who've often built lives and careers in the U.S. for years, even decades. Beyond this, our sources highlight that the Trump administration has issued warnings to even green card holders, people who are permanent residents, urging them to behave like guests in the U.S. or face deportation, suggesting that even those with seemingly secure permanent residency status aren't entirely immune from scrutiny or political pressure. There have also been persistent attempts by Trump to end birthright citizenship via executive order. Now, that's currently been struck down by federal judges, but it highlights a broader, ongoing effort to redefine citizenship itself and limit future immigration pathways. Lastly, and sadly, this pervasive fear around deportation and the precariousness of status has become ripe ground to extort money from these students and workers. Our sources cite the chilling example of Shreya Bay, who tragically lost 4.2 lakhs, which, for context, is roughly $5,000 to one of these scams. Another case involved a potentially blacklisted passport due to an unresolved legal issue, showing how incredibly vulnerable these individuals can become, falling prey to malicious actors who expertly leverage their anxieties and their uncertain legal status.
Okay, so after hearing about all these policies, the increased enforcement, the expanded surveillance, the deep vulnerabilities faced by these highly skilled immigrants, it leads to a truly provocative question, doesn't it? Why would a country like the U.S. implement or even consider policies that seem designed to purge or limit highly skilled immigrants? Especially when the data our sources present suggests it makes absolutely no economic sense. It seems fundamentally counterintuitive to its own prosperity and long-term competitiveness.
It's an excellent question, and it's really at the very heart of the counter-arguments to these restrictive immigration policies. Economically, many of these measures, as illuminated by our sources, appear to be fundamentally self-defeating, really shooting oneself in the foot, economically speaking. For instance, a report cited in our sources compellingly states that each H-1B worker creates 2 to 3 jobs for Americans. 2 to 3 jobs. This directly challenges that narrative that foreign workers displace American jobs. Instead, it suggests they act as powerful job multipliers within the economy, stimulating further growth and employment for native-born citizens. Furthermore, Indian immigrants, in particular, have been incredibly entrepreneurial and absolutely vital to the U.S. economy. Our sources report that they have created over 1 million jobs through startups in the U.S., over 1 million jobs. Their broader economic contribution is truly substantial. They contribute $300 billion to U.S. GDP every single year. That's not a marginal impact. It's a significant infusion of economic value, year after year. And the reliance of the American tech sector on this talent isn't just immense, it's arguably foundational. The CEO of the Silicon Valley Central Chamber of Commerce has been quite vocal, quite direct, stating unequivocally that American tech companies cannot survive without Indians. Cannot survive. This isn't just an opinion, it's reflected starkly in the numbers. Our sources indicate that 66% of tech workers in Silicon Valley are foreigners. That's literally 2 out of 3 people working in tech there. Just imagine that proportion. Our sources also highlight that, quote, many of America's most valuable tech firms are run by Indian origin leaders. We're talking giants like Sundar Pichai at Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe. Even former President Trump's own top AI advisor, Sriram Krishnan, is an Indian American. So when you look at these facts, the job creation, the startup boom, the GDP contribution, the deep reliance of Silicon Valley, the leadership roles, it becomes clear, as one of our sources powerfully put it, that economically a lot of these policies are absolute madness. The profound concern, articulated by experts in our sources, is that such policies could undermine U.S. innovation, because over half of America's top AI talent is foreign-born, and most of them are from India and China. It truly presents a significant tension, almost an existential dilemma, Between political rhetoric driven by nationalistic impulses and the undeniable economic reality of a globalized talent landscape that the U.S. has benefited massively from.
That economic reality, which our sources so clearly lay out, presents such a compelling counter-narrative to the policy shifts we've been discussing. It really paints a picture of self-sabotage, in a way, doesn't it? But despite the severity of the situation, the chilling data suggesting economic detriment, and the profound personal anxieties, there's also a clear spirit of resistance, determination, and adaptation among those affected. It's not just a story of vulnerability, it's also definitely a story of resilience.
Absolutely. There's been significant pushback against these policies, both at the individual level and collectively. Our sources mention that nationwide protests erupted against Trump's immigration policies during his first term, demonstrating a real public outcry against these directives. And the government's response to those protests was notable in its scale. Trump reportedly deployed more than 4,000 National Guard members and 700 Marines in response. Now, for context, our sources highlight that this is more uniformed personnel than the U.S. troops publicly reported to be in Syria, around 2,000, and Iraq, around 2,500 combined at that time. It illustrates the perceived gravity of the situation from the administration's perspective and their willingness to use significant resources to enforce its stance and, well, quell dissent.
And it's not just about large-scale public protests, right? Our sources also provide incredibly inspiring stories of individuals fighting back and, importantly, winning. They indicate that many Indian students, specifically, are going to courts for visas being revoked unlawfully. And the good news here, it seems, is that they are winning in the courts and getting their visas back, especially when the revocation was for these minor issues like old parking or speeding tickets that have been resolved years prior. Now, while this process is certainly described as a hassle, I mean, requiring significant legal help, time, money, it powerfully demonstrates the possibility of fighting for one's education and status within the U.S. legal system. It proves that these revocations aren't always the final word. It underscores a profound perseverance in the face of daunting, often seemingly arbitrary challenges.
Yeah, and this collective experience, this mix of heightened vulnerability and these individual victories, has also led to some truly crucial, pragmatic advice being shared widely within the community for both prospective and current Indian students and workers. For those planning to study or work in America, the advice coming through loud and clear is, face the reality you're going for education and experience not permanent settlement anymore. This is a fundamental, almost paradigm-shifting adjustment in mindset for many who once viewed the U.S. as a fairly straightforward path to permanent residency. Secondly, it's strongly advised to have a backup plan, whether that's Canada, the UK, Australia, or even returning to India. This diversification of options is now seen as absolutely essential, a vital risk mitigation strategy. A particularly strong piece of advice, emphasized by every single person our source spoke to, is do not take massive loans assuming a U.S. salary will repay them. The financial risk and the uncertainty have become simply too high to gamble on future earnings given this volatile policy landscape. Finally, it's recommended to build skills that are valuable globally. Skills that transcend borders are in demand everywhere, and to network with people who are returning from the U.S., because many of them are building amazing things back home in India and are looking for skilled talent. Now, for those already in America, the advice shifts to navigating the immediate uncertain landscape. The first and most critical piece of advice from everyone our sources spoke to is document everything, your visas, approvals, every single immigration interaction, every communication. Maintaining meticulous, exhaustive records is paramount. You might need them to defend your status at any moment. Secondly, the counsel is, do not assume you're safe. Keep lawyers on speed dial. This proactive, almost defensive stance is a direct reflection of the heightened scrutiny and the expanded grounds for visa review. Thirdly, individuals are advised to build portable wealth and do not log everything into U.S. real estate, acknowledging the very real possibility of needing to liquidate assets quickly and move elsewhere. And perhaps the most poignant, maybe the most difficult advice for the worst-case scenario where there's truly no other choice is to make peace with returning to India or moving elsewhere. It's not a failure, it's America's loss. End unquote. This reframes potential departure not as a personal defeat or a shortcoming of the individual, but as a consequence of the policies themselves and a significant loss of invaluable talent for the United States.
Despite all these formidable challenges, the very real advice to prepare for a potentially different future and the immense pressure. There's an undeniable and remarkable resilience observed within the Indian community in the U.S. Our sources spoke to many Indians who, despite everything, were defiantly saying, "We are not backing down. We have come here to study. We have come here to work. We'll figure it out." End quote. It's an incredibly tenacious spirit, a profound determination that really shines through all the uncertainty. We even heard an illustrative anecdote that just embodies this perseverance perfectly. Someone who had been fired twice just last year, navigating incredible stress. Actually got his H-1B approved during the very conversation our source was having with him, highlighting the sheer tenacity and, well, sometimes sheer luck involved in this process. It truly brings home the incredible capacity for adaptability and determination that we see within this community. They are, without a doubt, some of the most hardworking people. And even when faced with a system that presents immense obstacles, they demonstrate this profound resolve. They will fight, they'll persist, and they'll figure out a way to make the best out of the situation, embodying a relentless pursuit of their goals. Hashtag outro.
Yeah, what really stands out here, looking at all our sources, is this fundamental tension that defines this moment. You have the invaluable contributions of immigrants to the U.S. tech sector and the broader economy. Just undeniable contributions, set against increasingly stringent and, frankly, sometimes economically counterproductive immigration policies. The talent is clearly there, the economic impact is massive, yet the policy environment is shifting in ways that make it harder, not easier, for this talent to thrive and contribute fully. It's a really complex interplay of politics, economics, and, at the end of the day, human lives.
And so for you, our listener, given the detailed insights we share today, how might countries effectively balance these nationalistic economic goals with the globalized reality of talent and innovation? It's a huge question. What does this mean for the future of global talent mobility and for the choices individuals will make about their careers and lives, especially when faced with such profound uncertainty and this constant reevaluation of their place in the world? We really encourage you to reflect on these complexities and the very human stories behind these policies.